Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Customer Experience Behind the Scenes, the series where we go past the buzzwords and get into the real work of creating meaningful, human-centered experiences. I'm Carl Charisse, your host with the most, and I'm delighted to have you all with us here for Season 3, Episode 12. Wow, this makes the 36th episode since we began the series back in 2022, December 2022. Boy, how quickly that time has passed. Seems like only yesterday. If you've been part of this community over that time, thank you for returning and continuing to share your insights, your curiosity, and your stories. And if this is your first time joining us, a warm welcome. We're glad you're here. Every episode we host is built around the idea that CX grows stronger through honest conversation and the practical lessons we learn from each other. And if you ever want to watch or catch up on any of the earlier sessions, episodes, the full play library is available anytime you want at questionpro.com. A little bit about me and my work. I lead Horizon CX, a consulting practice focused on helping organizations make customer experience not just a strategic intent, but a daily habit and a shared responsibility. I also created the CX Pro certification program, which has now helped more than 185 practitioners around the world strengthen their skills, expand their thinking, and deepen their impact within their respective organizations. And on top of that, I've written a couple of companion books. One is titled CX Pro, a practical guide for the new customer experience manager. And the other one is called CX Pro Beyond the Basics. And both are aimed at helping CX professionals move from foundational understanding to confident real-world application. And more recently, I introduced a new course called Effective Customer Communications. And that one is based on the belief that nearly every memorable customer experience, good or bad, stems from communication that either elevates or gets in the way. And on a personal note, my newest book, titled Rock and Roll Underdogs, Hidden Gems Within the Shadows of Stardom, was released on October 28th. Really excited about that. And that's been gaining some wonderful traction. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And actually, it's been featured by some of the artists that are in the book. They're using it at their shows as a part of their merch table. And the response has been really incredibly energizing. It really celebrates musicians who poured their hearts into the work that didn't always find the mainstream spotlight. And that theme in many ways parallels the passion, perseverance, and behind-the-scenes excellence that we see every day in the CX community. So with that, let's transition in today's discussion. CX Behind the Scenes is all about true-to-life stories, practical challenges and breakthroughs, and shared wisdom that emerges when we learn together. So as we move through today's conversation, feel free to jump into the chat with your questions, perspectives, reactions, whatever. It isn't meant to be a one-way broadcast. It's a dialogue, and your voice is what makes it meaningful. So with that, I'm going to let Chris give us a little introduction to Question Pro for those who may not know who Question Pro is. And I can't believe that there's anybody yet that doesn't know, but let's find out.
Yeah, always love to share our story as well. So hello and welcome to the season finale of CX Behind the Scenes. I'm Chris Diakuski from Question Pro. We're incredibly proud to sponsor this series because we believe that while software powers the mechanism of CX, people power the heart of it. This year, 2025, has been defined by one massive shift: artificial intelligence. At Question Pro, we see it in the platform every day, automating decisions and analyzing data faster than ever before. But it raises a scary question for a lot of leaders. In the rush to automate, are we going to lose that human connection that builds actual loyalty? This is the challenge we are tracking today. Humanity at scale. Sorry about that. We believe AI shouldn't replace your humanity. It should amplify it. But you need the right framework to make it happen. So for our final episode of this year, we didn't want a guest. We wanted a visionary who defined this industry. He's often called the godfather of customer experience, and he's here to show you how to lead with values in the AI world. I'm going to hand it over to our host, Carl Charisse, to bring in our legendary Temkin.
Legend. Thank you. Great. Thanks, Chris. Before we dive into the discussion today, and I know it's going to be a good one, let's get started with our quick poll to frame up this discussion here. So we're talking about AI, or artificial intelligence, and the very real ways it's beginning to influence our organizations, our decisions, and the experiences that we deliver every day. So you may be the most, what concerns you most about the growing use of AI in customer and employee experiences? That's the question. You may be most concerned about losing a human touch through automation, or maybe data is misused or misunderstood. Some people worry about trust and transparency. AI influences decisions. Others may focus on the impact on employee roles and skills. So it could be over automation, where efficiency starts to outweigh the experience. So take a moment to share your perspective here, and we'll look at the results in just a minute. And we'll see how your view aligns with what our guest has been observing in his work in Humanity at Scale. So what concerns you most about the growing use of AI in customer and employee experience? So I'm going to participate in that myself. I usually do that right there with the QR code. There we go. Join. We got a few people chiming in here. Great. Come on, it's got to be more than 9 participants in this. Oh, we went down to 8. Okay, we're back. There we go. There's a few more. That's good. We were fed up to you. So here we are. What concerns you most about the growing use of AI in customer experience? Is it losing the human touch, misuse or a misinterpretation of data, lack of transparency or trust, impact on employee roles and skills, or over automation for efficiency's sake? Wow. I think I know where I fit in that one. And it looks like a lot of people feel the same way. Huh. Oh, we got a tie here. Okay, so losing the human touch and impact on employee roles and skills. Both got top votes. Interesting. Thank you, Paulina. All right, moving on here. Our guest today is someone who has not only shaped the field of customer experience, he helped create it. Over the course of his career, Bruce has been a visionary force behind how organizations think about customer experience, employee experience, and more broadly now, human experience. His influence spans several decades in several major institutions, including his leadership roles at Forrester Research, where he was the firm's most read analyst for 13 straight quarters, the Temkin Group, which sets the foundation for modern CX practices, and of course, the Qualtrics XM Institute, where he helped cement experience management, or XM, as a strategic discipline in companies around the world. Many of you also know that Bruce was the co-founder of the Customer Experience Professionals Association back in 2011 alongside Gene Bliss. What some of you may not know is that I had the privilege of knowing Bruce even before CXBA was formed. I was also one of the founding members of the association from the very beginning. I've admired not just Bruce's thought leadership and his generosity, but his humility and unwavering commitment to elevating the CX profession. And over the years, he's become not only a respected colleague, but a friend, someone I've turned to for insight, encouragement, and inspiration. So today, Bruce is continuing to push the field forward as he explores how organizations can thrive at the intersection of humanity and technology. His latest work challenges the assumption that AI must erode empathy or judgment. Instead, he shows leaders how AI can scale and even strengthen the human elements that matter most: trust, understanding, and purpose. We are fortunate to have him with us today to delve into one of the most important conversations of our time. what it means to create humanity at scale in the age of AI. Bruce, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Great, Carl. It's so wonderful, but I'm a little bit worried. All right, we're in the final episode of the show, and having watched lots of episodes, lots of final episodes, I think that means that one of us is going to get into a tragic accident during this episode and be in the hospital, and your listeners aren't going to find out till next season what happened to us. So I'm a little scared to be in the final episode of the season.
Well, don't despair. It's a little bit like Spinal Tap. We're going to be having CXBS, The End Continues. So before we get going, I always like to ask my guests where they find pleasure outside of their primary work. So Bruce, can you share some of your alternative passions so that they might relate to the subject of humanity in general? You know, my other passion, as you know, is music and playing it and writing about it. Maybe you're a musician too. I'm not sure about that. I think you played a ukulele once or twice. No?
No, Karen, my wife, loves ukulele. I would say so. My passion, my first passion now is grandfathering, which is I would say become my number one passion. Couple others, I'd say a big golfer, love to golf, and I also this is a surprising one. I really like to write. I have a weekly newsletter, and people go, "Well, what's it like? Is it a drag?" And I like writing. If I go away on vacation, like I think about, oh my goodness, I'm going to have time to myself to write. So anyway, those are my quirky passions.
And I see all your writings too. I saw one come in just this morning, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet because
every Tuesday morning at 9 Eastern time, there's a newsletter coming out.
I'll have to put that in my calendar. So yeah, grandfathering would be a really good thing to be grounded in humanity there, because that's what I was busy with a 4-year-old granddaughter here this morning. So let's just dive right into this here. You spent your career at the intersection of customer experience, employee experience, organizational purpose. Now, from your vantage point, have you found the biggest misconception leaders have right now about AI and its role in the human experience? And I came up with this phrase just earlier today: fools rush in before the consequences are understood. So let's fly on that one.
Oh, I like that. And so I've had the opportunity, back to my days at Forrester, to focus on many technology waves. The internet, the B2B internet, the CRM, then the cloud-based computing, right? And the reality of lots of technology that ends up being transformational is the simple reality, which is that they end up having less impact on the short term and more impact on the long term. We overestimate their impact in the short term. We underestimate their impact in the long term. And clearly, AI is like that. And it's not that, in the short, there's a lot of hype, and AI does a lot of things. But for AI to have the type of impact of all the things we're talking about, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of data that needs to be integrated into the learning and training of the models. They have to be integrated into the systems that we use. Roles and responsibilities and what organizations do all need to change. That stuff is slow, right? But I will say that AI is having and showcasing a lot of what it can do already, and it's still having meaningful impact. And I'll give you another phrase to go along with yours, which I think is sort of my founding discussion about AI, which is that a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? Yeah. That AI is just a tool, and we decide what we do with it. And if we are a fool and we do foolish things with it, it will do that.
That's a really validating statement. I like that, because that's a way, I'm not kind of patting myself in the back, but I treat AI as a tool. I mean, I use several pieces of AI as a tool almost every day in my work, but it's not a substitute for, I can't have it replace me, or at least it's not yet anyway. And I'm wondering do you think that there's a lot of organizations that, oh yes, it's AI now, I got to do something with that because I'm being told that if I don't, I'm going to miss out on something here. Do you think it's an application or a manifestation of the fear of missing out? Organizations are just rushing in with anything before they really know what it can do or how it should be done?
I think absolutely. Like every wave of technology I've seen, there's been some early adopters who thoughtfully think about some things, and then a bunch of people who sort of hear the possibility and say we have to do something and we have to transform, but they haven't put the thought into where they want to go, where they want to end up, and it's a lot of pushing of AI. So and I will say that a lot of this, and this is true for decades in my work of technology, is a lot of this is driven by tech vendors, right? Every tech vendors love tech waves, right? No surprising. So they end up telling stories of huge impact with very little work. And that message is as old as the first technology. Probably the cavemen talked about that, right? Fire is easy. Fire changes everything. You need fire. And of course, that led the other cavemen to set fire to their homes and their huts and everything they own. And so they were out in the cold again. But, I think, there's opportunity for AI, but it's not meant for everything to do everything they want to right now.
Yeah, that's the fool with the tool right there. Huh?
Yeah.
All right. Now, you've argued that AI doesn't have to dehumanize work, but many organizations fear exactly that. What distinguishes, in your mind, companies that use AI to enhance humanity from those that unintentionally erode it? What's the difference?
I think it's your goals and objectives around using the tool. We'll keep coming back to the notion of a tool, right? The AI doesn't do anything. AI doesn't dehumanize. AI doesn't increase humanity on its own. AI, the way that AI is applied ends up doing those things, right? So if we decide that we're going to focus our use of AI on driving efficiency and eliminating human jobs and cutting costs, then I would think that a natural extension to that use of AI is a diminishing of humanity, right? But that would be any tool. If I just went into a business and said, all I'm going to focus on is absolute efficiency, cutting costs and cutting people, the result would be less humanity. Now, if I decided on the flip side that what I want to use AI to do is enhance the work that my people do, I want to make them more productive, I want to make them happier, and I want to bring things to customers that they couldn't have before and enhance the value that we're creating for customers in new ways, well, that approach to using AI would likely lead to a much more human environment. So I think it has to do with what we set out to do and what our objectives are with the tool.
Yeah, it's interesting because it made me think of a organization I worked for some years ago where they decided that Six Sigma was going to be the new tool. It was going to work in the organization. So they implemented, throughout the organization, black belts, green belts, Kaizen, you name it, DMAIC. And it went on for about 3 years. And then they decided, okay, we're done with that. It didn't do what we wanted it to do. Well, what did they want it to do? They wanted it to cost out the organization, and it didn't do enough cost out. So they got rid of it. So there you go. A fool with a tool is probably the best example right there.
Yeah, and as long as we're going in the Wayback Machine, since Carl and I can go way back. Yes. So years ago, and people may not know this about me, early in my career, I was at General Electric. I was an internal consultant. and I led the first Six Sigma projects, I think, in the world, right? Because there wasn't a notion of Six Sigma before that. So that the discussion about black belts and Six Sigma really sort of brings me back a lot of years.
Yeah. So let's get to this. Here's a question. There's been a burning question on my mind, and I'm sure on a lot of other folks' mind here, that your recent thinking about humanity at scale. What does that look like in practice? And can you share an example of an organization that might be doing something like that? I mean, humanity at scale is just such a broad word. Can we unpack that a little bit and just see what's underlying, what's under the hood of humanity?
Yeah. Yeah, it is both. So interesting enough, when I left Qualtrics, because I really wanted to do this work around humanity at scale and have a broader impact, I was faced with exactly the discussion you want, which is that is a big thing. It was a big thing, but how do I take that big thing and make it into something that's manageable? So you'll notice, like, even if you're not looking, you're listening, that my logo says sparking humanity at scale, right? So what I'm looking at doing is not what do organizations look like with humanity at scale. That's too big. That's not the world that I'm trying to focus on. What I'm trying to focus on is what do individual leaders do and what do they do differently that ends up pushing organizations into a more humane path. And so my focus is around how do leaders lead in a way that drives humanity forward. And that'll get to the way the organization. So back to the question, what does that look like and how is that different? One of the big things I'm working on is trying to get leaders to understand human beings to begin with. Right. Over the course of my career, I've been lucky enough to see academic research that wasn't leveraged enough in the business world and translated back in or do my own research in it. And so I spent a lot of time, you'll see in my work around behavioral science. Right. So one of the things I'm trying to do is teach leaders, if you don't understand how people think, feel, and act to begin with, then any decision you make is going to be devoid of reality of how it's going to land. So getting them to understand, how do I get customers and employees to do the things I want to do? How do I get them to actually feel good about the decisions I'm trying to make? And how do I end up finding the sweet spot between improving the lives of everyone I touch and achieving my business objectives? And that's sort of a breakdown. And one of the big things I'm trying to teach leaders, besides understanding human beings, is understanding that there's a false trade-off between focusing on people and focusing on results. At the end of the day, I don't believe it is possible to sustain the results that you want without focusing on the needs of people.
So that sounds a little bit, to me, it's reminding me of when we talk about this in the CX Pro class about leadership being of a couple of major varieties, right? A traditional top-down leadership, and probably the one that you're mentioning, focusing on results and stuff, or servant leadership. And that sounds more like in the bailiwick of servant leadership. At least you got to be in that mindset in order to become a humanistic leader. Would you agree?
So, yeah, I think it's funny because I think there's a bit of servant leadership in it, but I always feel uncomfortable with like binary choices because it forces people to make a decision whether I'm A or B. I think that leaders need to have attributes in themselves that allow them to get to the point where they're more humanity-centric. And so, for instance, one of the key things I believe is that for a leader to be more humanity-centric, they have to focus a lot on what they view and want their legacy to be, right? So, I think a lot of people behave in ways that their future selves would not be proud of, right? So I'm not telling leaders that you need to be a servant leader and that will make you proud in the future. What I'm trying to say is, let's spend a little time thinking about your future and thinking about how your future will describe the things you're doing now, and ask yourself, will you be proud of that? Right. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to look at the dissonance between who they are and who they want to be, without forcing them to say, are you a top-down leader or a servant leader? Right. Let's just focus on what you want and how you want to show up, and ask the question, are you doing the things now that will make your future self proud?
Yeah, that is slightly different. I mean, I didn't mean to put it in kind of a binary context here, because some people will exhibit qualities of both, you know. At times I have to be top down, you know. If I see a kid running out to the road, I say, stop and grab them. That's command and control right there, you know. So we all share those characteristics, but I like that. What do you want your future self to look like, and what do you want to be proud of? So let me see here. I want to ask you something here. You know, AI is really involved in how decisions get made in organizations. What guidance do you give in your work with leaders who are maybe struggling to try to figure out, you know, which decisions should remain human and which should be either augmented by AI or fully automated?
Yeah, so when I talk about AI, a lot of my work is around the notion of human AI collaboration, right? That the best of both worlds is what we're talking about. How do you get human and AI to collaborate? So it's not in any situation do you use AI, use human. It's sort of, how do you do collaboration? And there are some places where AI can replace some of the things that human decisions make, like basic decisions. If I need to decide on where, you know, 1,000 people are going to get variations of a message, right? That's something that I can't do, a human can't do, but that AI can do quite well. But if I'm going to decide what the objectives of that is, and I'm going to teach it and prompt it on how to do it right, that takes AI and human collaboration. So to me, it's about, how do we build that collaboration? How do we find places? I mean, human beings are way better at improvising. Human beings are way better at creativity. And human beings have values that they care about. Human beings have desires. Human beings have a vision, all that stuff that AI has none of. But AI is very good at sort of making repetitive analysis. And then when it comes to bigger questions like, you know, are we going to default to AI to make a big strategic decision? Well, I think you got to treat AI like you would treat any smart analyst who came in with a recommendation, right? It's a recommendation. You have to ask them where their sources are, right? What are they basing that understanding on? You have to make it transparent. And you can't just sort of offload responsibility of decision-making to AI the same way no CEO would offload decision-making to anyone on their staff, right? You want input, right? You want smart people to give you their point of view, but at the end of the day, you have to remember that the decision rests with you as a human being.
So here's a good example of that. As we were talking earlier, I published this book called Rock and Roll Underdogs. So I'm trying to figure out, as an individual, I don't have a lot of money for marketing. I need to figure out, how do I move this thing? So I've connected with particular people in the business and stuff like that. But I used AI to help me understand what are the options out there? How can I move my book forward? And only recently it came up with an idea that I should try to go to one of these, you know, grand vinyl and record shows that are held, you know, around the area of Boston and Maine and stuff like that. And the last 2 Sundays ago, that's what I did. I took and I bought a table at a booth, and I went there with my books, and I got to talk to lots of people. So it's that kind of a thing. I mean, it came up with that idea amongst a whole bunch of other ideas, by the way. But I'm going to try that one. So I'm working in collaboration, I feel, with AI. We're working partnership with this.
Yeah, and let's take that example and dissect it a little bit for the human AI connectivity. And I talk about modes of human AI collaboration, right? And you just discussed a few of them. The first is creativity, right? Humans are creative, but AI can come up with ideas, right? So you asked it in a certain context, what are some good ideas to come up with it? It was your creativity that established the context for wanting to know that in the first place, right? And it gave you some ideas. And then there was judgment, right? It gave you some trade-offs, whatever, but you ultimately made the decision based on, other factors you have, and then you made it happen. So that's a great example of collaboration and what AI does. And I'll tell you with me, so I told you I write a weekly newsletter. And I heavily used a few AI models to do that. So people might say, well, is AI writing that or are you writing that? And my answer is clear. It is me. So if you looked at my interactions with and I use a lot ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, but if you look at my interactions with any model to write a newsletter, I probably have 150 or more interactions with it, right? It's not, I want to write this, write it for me. There's hundreds of interactions I have where I'm writing pieces and asking it for feedback, or I'm saying to draft up a section and I give it feedback, right? But at the end of the day, if you looked at all of the interactions that we have together, you'd never come to the conclusion that AI is writing it, right? But you would come to the conclusion that AI is collaborating with me to write it.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that because I use that all the time. But here's an interesting one. And by the way, my wife Carol is retiring on the 23rd of December from UMass Boston. And one of the things that happened recently with graduate students is that the work that they're turning in is, if she looks at it and she's questioning it. And so she's questioned a couple of times, a couple of students, and they admitted that chat wrote the whole thing for them and they just handed it in. So there's an example of the improper application and use of AI, letting AI do the work for you and not even bothering to read it to know that that's you. So
and
very depressing for her because she's like, well, who am I grading here? Am I grading AI or am I grading a person?
And I think that distinguish is going to go away over time, right? I think if we don't, if AI is going to be a tool, just like, calculators became tools and Excel became tools, right? Do we want to measure people who we give them problems to do in a business and ask them to come to results without using Excel? Right. If I wanted you to look at thousands of cells and do some analysis on it, I'm not going to judge you worse because you used Excel. The person who came in and did it all by hand doesn't get any more points. So one of the things we have to, and I think educators need to figure this out. And I don't know the right exact answer, but even educators have to figure out, how do we test people not on their individual work, but on their work in using tools that are appropriate for that work.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, over time, clearly writing is going to be something that is often and probably most likely supported by AI. Because we don't want to teach people how to, at this point, if I was teaching a college student how to succeed in the world, I teach them how to write alongside AI as a collaborative partner. I wouldn't try and get them to write on their own and without it and expect that that's the way they're going to operate in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I know you might have kind of encountered this too. If I write something and then I have an evaluation of what I've written by AI and it comes back with some different ways of saying what I just said here, I'm learning from that because I'm reading everything, and I'm not just accepting what it comes back with to me with, but I'm reading it and I'm saying, oh, that it's almost like reading a book and saying, boy, I like that writer. I like the way that writer's style is. And I'm learning from just because sometimes I'll get a book and I'll just read the same page over and over because I love the way they expressed what they expressed. So
Yep.
it's a double, it's double loop learning, if you will. Okay, I don't know if I had some questions that came from audience questions here ahead of time. So let me tackle a couple of these to see how that works. So here's one. Many organizations say that they want to protect humanity in the age of AI, but incentives still heavily favor efficiency, automation, cost reduction. We talked about that. So how realistic is humanity at scale when business pressures point the other way? What does it take for leaders to actually choose the human-centered path and not the cheapest or fastest option?
Yeah, so that's a recurring question. I think the first thing is to not believe that it's a binary choice. I'm a big pusher of getting people to forget binary choices. Binary choices are the bane of much of the evil in the world. Binary choices about our thinking, binary choices about us versus them, binary thinking about I either have to choose to be efficient or be humanity centric, right? At the end of the day, if you want to drive efficiency, that is not inherently in the antithesis of being human-centric. You can do it in a human-centric way. You can ask the question of how do we drive efficiency by getting people to understand and behave in ways that are more effective for the organization? How do we think about efficiency differently, right? How do we think about efficiency not in terms of how do we eliminate people today, but how do we cut cost and time out of our processes and operations in the future? And a lot of those can be done sort of sparking human innovation, sparking human desire, making jobs even more fulfilling, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to be based on the old world of just getting people to work harder and having few of them around.
Yeah. Another question we had here says, AI can already outperform humans in pattern detection, predictive modeling, and speed of response. If we're honest, humans have become the slower part of the system. So how do we avoid relegating people only to the messy emotional problems while AI handles everything else? In other words, how do we ensure humanity isn't just preserved but valued?
So I would totally agree with some of that premise and totally challenge the question that came after it, right? So if AI is better at those things, and it really is, then the question isn't sort of how do we stop it from doing it to preserve humanity. The question is how do we leverage it in a way that improves humanity, right? Once again, it's a tool. And I think that there's nothing wrong and I think we're going into the realm of like customer support and customer experience a little bit there, right? Which is that there's nothing wrong with having AI do a lot of the things that it can do better and more effectively, but it still leaves rooms for lots of people to deal with the stuff that it doesn't handle well, right? Or the people that need more handholding, and then the AI can support the agents, right, in a better way to be more effective themselves, right? And if I'm an organization, right, I can decide whether I'm going to use those capabilities with a focus on totally cutting costs, or am I going to use those capabilities in a way that I can actually build a stronger, more human relationship with my customers? Because once again, that's a tool that's creating possibilities. You have to decide what you're going to do with those possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. One more question here submitted. You've talked about trust as foundational to human experience, but customers and employees often have very little to say whether AI is used in their interactions. So what safeguards do you believe must be non-negotiable so organizations don't unintentionally undermine trust in their rush to implement AI solutions?
So I think trust is a interesting thing. I think people often talk generically about trust. Do you trust this or you trust that? At the heart of trust is the willingness of one party to take a risk with another party, right? For an employee to take part of a risk is, I'm going to keep employed with this. I'm going to keep my profession and my professional future with this company. So trust isn't this sort of abstract sense of that I trust that you're doing all the right things or like that. So companies need to figure out, what is it that they want their employees to do? What risks are their employees taking with them? And then for an employee, you have to think about, my company is going to do a lot of things, especially when we get to AI, that I may not like or understand or know, but I need to feel like I believe that leader, those leaders are doing things in creating a future that I want to take a risk to be a part of. So I think that, for anyone employee who's asking that question about AI, you have to say, do I want to be part of an organization that's not using AI, doesn't have a future around AI, because they're really focused on giving me as an employee an opportunity to do things that AI could do? Like, you have to be asking the question, is that really the environment you want to take a risk on in the future? Or do you want to take a risk in an environment where there's an organization who's experimenting and trying to figure out where to make AI use work best, even if it has some short-term implications on my role and my job, right? But recognizing that that company is probably going to be much better off in 5 years than the company that's doing nothing or trying not to avoid AI because they worry about my trust, right? So at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what's the environment of a company for which you're willing to take a risk and put your career in their hands? And it's likely a much more innovative company that is positioned to succeed into the future, even if that has some short-term implications and ramifications on your work.
You know what's interesting about what you just said there, because it brought me back to 1984, and I had joined an organization that was building robots that were going to be used in laboratories for chemical analysis, which was a very new and very risky. And I remember leaving the organization that I was working for and going to this organization, and folks saying to me, "Oh, Carl, you're taking a big risk going into this organization." I worked there for 10 years, okay? But the leadership in that organization had this mantra around employees, and it was, do the right thing. That words were repeated over and over again, just do the right thing. And the implication there was, if you ended up doing something that wasn't the right thing, you needed to learn from that. So there were no mistakes. So there was a very risk-free environment to work into a risky product proposition. So you had both of that going. It was an interesting 10 years of my career, I must say. That organization has long gone. I know we're getting close here to your time. Kind of looking ahead, what skills or mindsets do you believe that both customer experience and employee experience professionals need to cultivate to remain effective in this AI-driven environment?
Yeah, so I think you have to be open to collaborating with AI, right? I think, in the field of customer experience, employee experience, any type of experience management, AI is going to play a role, right? Because if you think about it, AI has a better way, has created an environment where, and you talked about it earlier, right? It can see patterns, it can interact with more humans in more ways, right? So I think if you're a practitioner, you have to be asking a question, not what am I going to be replaced by, but how do I leverage AI to do my job better? How do I build skills on top of that? And I go back to, we're talking about early career stuff, right? So you work for a robot. I remember my first job out of college. I worked at a Navy laboratory, and some of what I did was programming. And my programming was for missile systems. We had a special language called Atlas. It's sort of a test language. But I would program I'd have 16 switches, and I'd have to do the switch up or down, and then push in that was a command. Now, like, that was programming. And then you could say, well, along came things like C++ or C and C++, and I later led development organizations. But one could say that with any new language that came up like C, you wouldn't need programmers anymore. But look what happened over the years.
Yeah.
And the language has gotten more sophisticated. The technology around how you actually program has gotten higher and higher, more and more sophisticated. Yet at the same time, we have more and more developers. Now, I'm not saying that'll go on forever, but the idea that the more sophisticated the technology and the systems get, the less you're going to need people to work with them and around them is completely false based on any accurate look at history. Right? We created, when we create new technology, what we end up doing is establishing a new baseline of capabilities that then ends up enabling a whole host of new roles and new opportunities. So going back to the question about what should CX and EX professionals do, you should be asking yourself, not only how do I use, like I said, AI to do my job, but you should be asking yourself about what does a successful CX and EX person look like in 5 years on top of those capabilities? How do you sort of become the shining star in the field based on where you think AI is going to take the sector that you're in?
All right. I want to do a little lightning round here. These are like quick answers to silly questions. So let's start over here. If AI were a new employee on day one, what's the first thing you'd want it not to do?
Not to annoy any of the other employees.
Okay. What is one human superpower AI will never match, no matter how hard it tries?
Inspiration.
I can agree with that. If you could give every leader on AI an AI survival kit, what's one item you'd be sure to put in it?
I think a license for ChatGPT so that they use it on their own and they get comfortable with it.
Oh, cool. What's the fastest way an organization can accidentally dehumanize at scale?
Forgetting that technology is a tool and thinking that it's the answer. Remember, if you do foolish things with a tool, you remain foolish yourself.
Okay, if CX had a theme song for the AI era, what would the title be?
Oh my God!
I came up with one, but I want to see if you.
A theme song for AI.
That might be
probably. Yeah, I'd let. Maybe Born to Run.
Born to Run.
We'll
Okay.
give it. Yeah. A little high energy. It's ready to get in there, and we got to put it to use. And by the way, a friend of mine, and actually, Andy Freed, right? Remember Andy?
Yep.
He wrote a book, How to Lead Like the Boss.
I know.
Which is
I'm
all
buy
about
that book as soon as I can. I'm going to buy that. No, my theme song came up with a little help from my friends.
Oh, better. Yes, I would have always thought that question, Carl, you'd give a better answer to.
Okay, if AI ever becomes self-aware, what's the first CX lesson you hope it learns before it tries to give us all a satisfaction survey?
Oh my God. I hope it remembers that, first of all, that scaled inputs are not really good to understand things. And I hope to God it doesn't ask any question on an 11-point scale.
Oh, this scale goes to 11.
Whoop, whoop. I'm gonna make the next measurement even better. 12-point scale.
There you go.
A
Anyway,
little spinal tap for all of our listeners.
yeah. Well, my granddaughter, she was told one day, she was in the bathtub, and her mother said, "You have 10 minutes left. You have to get out." You know what she said?
What?
"I need 11." There you go.
Awesome.
Anyway, thank you, Bruce. As always, it's wonderful. I'm glad we had you here on our final session for 2025. And thank everybody for taking the time to join us today and in this discussion. It's been a pleasure sharing these conversations with everyone here over the past 3 years as we close out this year. I want to wish everybody a safe and peaceful holiday season and the very best in the new year. Please stay connected and let's see what the new year has in store for each of us. Thank you again, Bruce. And thank you again, audience out there. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.